Last King of Scotland, take 2. Howdy, I'm Jeff Goldsmith, senior editor for Creative Screenwriting Magazine, and yes, this is the second screening that we have done of Last King of Scotland, and it's a totally new podcast. As you know, the first podcast had the director, Kevin MacDonald, and the co-star, James McAvoy. Today, we're very pleased to have co-writer, Jeremy Brock. Peter Morgan, who also wrote on Last King of Scotland, was not in Los Angeles for this Q&A, but again, while we were sad to not have Peter Morgan with us, we are very excited to have Jeremy Brock, who gives us further insight into the writing process of this fine film. This is a Fox Searchlight movie. Speaking of other Searchlight movies, we're going to have a screening coming up soon of Little Miss Sunshine. It's going to be on October 24th. So if you want to send in a question to the screenwriter of Little Miss Sunshine, Michael Arndt, you could send it to rsvp@creativescreenwriting.com. In the subject, put Little Miss Sunshine question, and I'll go through them, and I'll pick a couple from our listeners around the world who've seen Little Miss Sunshine and have a question for Michael. Of course, keep in mind to skip out on the obvious questions. How'd you break in? Stuff like that. Yeah. I'm going to get to that. So, if there's something specific about the movie that you really want to ask, go for it. And maybe your question will get asked. Make sure to tell us your full name and where in the world you're listening from. And, of course, keep those emails coming in. It's great to hear from people all over the world. Next week's podcast, hopefully, will be The Prestige. We're definitely doing it in the screening series. As you all know, next weekend, October 20th, is the Screenwriting Expo. So it is going to be a very quick turnaround to get The Prestige up in time for Friday, with the Expo starting on Thursday and the Prestige screening next Wednesday. Yeah, I'm exhausted, man. But I'm going to try. So if it isn't up instantly on Friday, keep checking back. It might be up later Friday. It could end up Saturday. I'm really going to burn the midnight oil, though, as I always do. So it should be up on Friday, no problem. And we're very excited to have co-writer Jonathan Nolan for The Prestige. That'll be next week's podcast. Speaking of the Expo, there's podcast listeners coming down. I've tried to set a time when we could all get together for drinks, unsuccessfully, because the schedule of the stuff that I need to do at the Expo keeps changing. So, if you have your artwork option open in iTunes and you've seen a picture of me, feel free to stop me anytime, say hi, and stay tuned. Maybe in the Prestige podcast next week, I'll be able to announce a time when we could all get together for a good old podcast drink. I will be heavily involved with the Pitch Fest that we have going on at the Renaissance Hotel. As you know, the Expo's at both the Marriott and the Renaissance next to each other. So I'll be in the Renaissance a lot too, so that's a good way to catch me. And thanks for all of your virtual tips coming in through our PayPal virtual tip jar. If you like what you hear and you want to throw in a couple bucks, it's going to help us buy a camera, other equipment, tapes for each screening for our backup device, etc., etc. You could toss in a few bucks at www.creativescreenwritingmagazine.blogspot.com. And now, without further ado, let's go right into the Q&A at this, our second screening, The Last King of Scotland, with co-writer Jeremy Brock. So, the most common question that anyone wants to know when we have a screenwriter in our series is, how'd you break in? How'd you get that first agent? Where'd you start? Tell us about breaking in as a screenwriter.
How did I break in? I had a kind of fairy tale experience because I wrote a very small TV film called Mrs. Brown that was going to go out on the BBC, and I got Harvey Weinstein. I got the Miramax thing. They saw a fine cut of the movie, and this was in '96, and it was at BAFTA in the UK, and I can remember the director John Madden ringing me up and saying he's watching Reel 3, and now he's watching Reel 4, and now he's watching the last reel. And the thing with Harvey was that he would leave when he chose to, and he stayed till the end, and that's how I made the jump.
That's great. But back before that, you had begun in TV with British television. Could you talk about breaking in kind of as an outsider to TV?
Yeah. Well, I was kind of fresh out of college, and I got a job as a script editor at the BBC, which is one of the ways kind of to negotiate your way into writing, and I was working on some kind of old-fashioned shows as a trainee script editor, and I got word from one of the executives high up in the kind of civil service-like place that it is, that they wanted a new hospital series, but they wanted it to be contemporary, and I just jumped and said, I'll come up with an idea. I had a friend from college, and we came up with an idea that became Casualty, which has been running for 20 years now.
Which is insane.
Which is insane. We had the 20th anniversary a few weeks ago.
How involved on a day-to-day, week-to-week type of basis are you still with
not
the show?
Very. No, I worked on it for 3 years solid, and they had me ghosting on other scripts. So it was fantastic apprenticeship, but I did find that after a while, anyone who mentioned a myocardial infarction or a change of blood type, I started to gag. So I realized that I had to kind of move away. But we get a royalty, so I have no complaints.
No complaints. 20 years running.
Yeah, I mean, I'm perfectly happy to.
So a lot of writers that we've interviewed start in TV, and one of the things they commonly say is that the demands of television really is a good way to learn how to write, because it's unforgiving. It's
relentless.
You have to meet those deadlines. You have to be able to outline, know where you're going.
You can't art house your way out of a deadline in TV.
Well, tell us about what you think TV really prepared you for feature writing.
Well, I think by and large, I've found the rules, the kind of rules of dramaturgy to be the same. You have to think about structure, you have to think about narrative traction, you have to think about character, and the only difference is that the scale is of a different order, the time you're given is of a different order, and the pain is higher. But actually, TV was useful in every regard, because at a stage when you're learning, you can make mistakes on the run. You can forgive yourself quicker because the next one's already coming. With film, the development hell can be very prolonged, whereas in TV there just isn't time. You've just got to shut up. That one wasn't so good, but the next one will be better, kind of thing. Yeah.
You'd collaborated with John Madden, as you said, a few times now. Talk about how your relationship started and how you guys have grown together artistically.
Well, John is one of my favorite people. He's the most fantastic patriarch, and he and I first met. I wrote a TV movie called The Widowmaker, which was based on an experience I had in Australia where I found out about some guy who'd done some atrocious killing. I think he'd kind of mown down about 16 people, but he'd survived, which made him unusual. And so I wrote a screenplay about what it would be like to be married to someone like that and not to have known, and how the wife survived. So it's from the wife's point of view. And John picked up the script and turned it into I think a terrific TV movie, and we bonded over that. And then we kind of went our separate ways for a while, and then he just came on board Mrs. Brown, and really I kind of felt very safe from that moment on, because I knew that he would be able to make it much better than it was when he wasn't there.
That makes sense. Tell me how you ended up on Last King of Scotland. To my knowledge, Peter Morgan had already written a draft for director Kevin MacDonald, and you were brought on. What was their thinking in bringing you on, and how'd you land the assignment?
It was a terrific script already, and I was asked by one of the producers, Andre Calderwood, who was working with Kevin, if I would read it, and whether I would be prepared to work with Kevin on it. I think the brief, as I remember it, was that they wanted to examine the kind of psychology between the Idi Amin character and, I say character, I mean he's a public domain, but it's a strange and difficult mix that you're dealing with. But Idi Amin and Garrigan are in a nexus between corruption and seduction, and there is a really tricky balance to strike. And we worked long and hard on trying to time it so that the revelations are properly paced, and so that the tone stays the right side of Grand Guignol. I guess.
I mean, the film has an excellent structure because it takes the audience as an outsider with Garrigan into the world of Uganda, and the deeper he gets, the more reality he sees. I thought one of the greatest turning points was probably the political assassination attempt.
Yeah.
Because that's when he really sees people that are about to be killed right in front of him. Was that based on fact, and what kind of research did you do?
Well, I had a strange brief because Kevin didn't want me to read the book. He wanted me to just stay with...
Again, we're talking about the book written by Giles Foden.
He didn't want me to read Giles Foden's novel, no. And he wanted me to just... we worked for 6 months, pretty solidly, and he wanted me to just stay with the screenplay, stay with the conversations we had. We live very nearby, so we used to go to a pub called the Lord Palmerston and kind of work it out there, which was fantastic.
Writing and beer always
writing and beer always
true.
terribly helpful. And gradually, I guess, through the way that Kevin works, which makes him an amazing director, is that he works by constantly discussing and scratching away at a problem. He doesn't let it go. He doesn't necessarily feel like he has to know. Some directors are more anal than that and feel like they have to know. They want it nailed down. He's very good at floating. And from a writing point of view, that's fantastic because it means you can experiment with the detail. And it was finding the incremental changes that take place in Garrigan was the really tricky thing. Setting up in his personality the things that will eventually make him a fallen angel or a fallen fool, depending what your point of view is. But certainly we spend a lot of time with the opening. We work very hard on trying to compress it because the novel is very discursive and more loose-limbed.
Now, did you actually get to read the novel? Because you just said that Kevin didn't want you to.
No,
so you're just kind of guessing now. I'm joking.
Yeah. No, I have to admit I did I did briefly visit the novel later, but I was really meaning the novel as an art form rather than that novel.
Well, sure, and you read Peter's script, I'm guessing, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and it was very fine, and the kind of work that I was doing was actually the kind of detailed work that's very much about collaboration with the director.
Writers love research.
They do,
I'm sure there was
tertiary
a lot of
education.
Yeah, I mean, it's also a great way to procrastinate, right? So
For sure.
what was the research like on a project like this? What kind of research did you do on Idi Amin, on the real doctor or composite of characters?
Composite of 3, yeah. Again, because of the nature of this particular brief, and it was a strange brief. I normally, when I'm doing material like Mrs. Brown or The Eagle of the Ninth, which is a project I'm doing now, I read an enormous amount about the period. He wanted me to stay very close to the script and the conversations that we had. I read a little bit about the history of Amin.
Did you watch archival footage?
No.
No? Okay.
No, I spent an inordinate amount of time talking to him. The thing that was most important, oddly enough, was István Szabó's Mephisto, which was a movie that he wanted me to immerse myself in because of how it deals with. I don't know whether people are familiar with this, but it's a film about an actor in Germany during the war, and he becomes a star under the Nazi regime, and he treads a very similar path to Garrigan, and this was a film that Kevin kind of got very hooked onto. And I found it to be a fantastic template. It's not, it's not like a copy of that because The Last King of Scotland has its own provenance in the novel, but it was a very useful way to understand what Kevin was looking for.
That's really interesting. Obviously, your habit, we're curious to hear about. How many hours a day do you write when you're actually writing? What's your workspace like?
I've just moved offices. I had an office in Islington in London for 13 years. My wife was absolutely adamant that I didn't work at home. I am like
well,
many
with leading a TV schedule, you would probably have a lot of hours.
Yeah,
so
and like I guess like a lot of people here, I become a really difficult human being when I'm in the middle of something, and she said, "Look, just leave the house and come back when you're done." So I've just taken, I'm just renting a little flat near our house now. And I work by going to work in the morning, drop the kids off at school, and I keep very regular hours, and I'm very used to the rhythm of writing, whereby I just go in and I really start straight away. I tend to do my displacement activity in sitting very still, dreaming. I don't hoover, but it's the same kind of thing. I work till about 4 or 5, and then and I don't work weekends anymore. That's the one difference between the early days.
Do you pick it back up at night? Like if you have an idea from home, do you?
I do. I scribble an inordinate number of notes on scraps of paper, which most of the time I never then refer to. It's like a sort of nervous tick. So by the end,
a lot of people do that. Actually,
yeah, it's the weirdest thing. So at the end of a screenplay, I'll have just piles of notes that I never look back on, and I think, why did I bother? But 4 a.m, I feel like it's the most important thing that I write it down, because my mother has Alzheimer's, and my brother and I and my sister are convinced we're all about to kind of drop another memory load. So we spend our whole time writing everything down.
That's interesting. Let's talk about the character of Idi Amin for a second. I mean, you and Peter did an amazing job in really humanizing somebody that most of the world thinks of as a terror, as a cannibal, as they should, by the way. 300,000 people perished under his rule.
Yeah.
But I guess to better understand him, you have to see that there was another side that could win people over. Talk about bringing in that humanity to his character.
Well, that was the key to the movie, having the complexity and the layering that Kevin was looking for. Had Amin been a kind of Grand Guignol villain, then it would have been one thing, but it would not have been a movie that asked the difficult questions of the audience that I think it does. If you think of the film as a rites of passage for Garrigan, we, the audience, go with him, and we enter the story. We enter the story of Amin with Garrigan, carrying, I hope, as little knowledge of Uganda as he had. When I say I hope, I mean, in a way, we should be with Garrigan. And the process of humanizing Amin was first of all to understand that he was seductive, he was funny, he was sensuous, and he was vulnerable. And it didn't mean that all those things couldn't live alongside the more monstrous, psychotic side to his nature. It was just a case of looking at it from Garrigan's point of view and trying in the writing to maintain a layer, like a layer of skin between you and the truth. And as you pointed out, the moment when there is the attempted assassination, you feel the ground shift, you feel the tectonic plate go woof under you, and at that point you're wishing Garrigan could just kind of pull back. And then the film takes on a different kind of a different energy, because you're thinking, Garrigan, for fuck's sake, you must pull back now. And of course he doesn't, because he kind of falls further into it, because he is in a kind of love relationship with Amin. And that's how the rest of the kind of movie gets carried along, because it is a love story, a very dark one.
This is always a tough question, but I got to ask it. I mean, it is based on real events, but this is not a documentary.
No.
You have to fictionalize.
Yeah.
You have to take dramatic license. How did you balance that? I mean, was that assassination attempt real? I know that a doctor did sleep with one of Amin's wives. Could you talk about the balance and some of the events that were real and some that were invented?
I mean, truthfully, I don't have a problem with it. I did the same thing in Mrs. Brown. I took public domain material and I played fast and loose with fact. I suppose I take the view that there is I owe allegiance to a kind of spiritual truth, whatever the truth of the film is. And this is a film about the nexus between seduction and corruption. But it's a moral journey that Garrigan goes on. And as long as the audience are aware, as I think they are, that you're dealing with a composite character, truth and invention can be woven together pretty much as the drama requires. There is a point at the end, the very end of the film, when he's flying away, and we talked about that being a moment where you come back out of the kind of illusion of truth and fiction, and as you come out, you're allowed again to watch the runner with the facts, and that's the moment where, if you like, you lift back off, literally in the plane, but also as an audience you come back out, and there you are, and there are the facts again. But up until the moment, that you come out, you're in this strange blend.
And the movie has an arc like that, because it has this great introduction in Act 1, Act 2 he's kind of sinking in it, and Act 3 he's fighting to get out with the audience, which I think is a great structure.
It had a natural structure that kind of offered itself up. Just
to give us a little more insight, tell us something that was completely fictional that you enjoyed adding, and something that you were reinforcing based on a real event.
The affair is fictional, with Kay.
Okay.
Of course, the it's based on. We know that someone did sleep with one of them, but the way that's articulated in the screenplay.
See, I was confused. Somebody did have an affair with one of his wives. It just wasn't clear that it was the doctor.
Given that Garrigan doesn't exist, we're in a strange territory here. The affair with Sarah Merritt as well is something which we talked about at great length. I'm just trying to think of other things that were...
the affair is a big thing. That's a big thing to fictionalize. It's probably the ballsiest thing that character does in the movie.
I'm just trying to think of better examples. You'll have to forgive me. I'm jet lagged, so every now and then my brain just goes...
You're doing great.
There are little moments which were very key in our discussion. One of them was when they go into the hangar and he takes him in and he sees the guys who have attempted to assassinate him. And because Mephisto was something we talked about a lot, we wanted there to be a little moment when he's on his own and he sees the blood on his shirt collar, kind of Macbeth-like. And we worked very hard to create little moments like that, which are, of course, purely fictional.
But it's good to know moments like that were scripted, actually. Just a cutaway shot of somebody's bloody sleeve.
Yeah, no, totally. And all those things were the consequence of endless discussion about how much we could push that. And we wanted to push it as far as we could.
What about something that was realistic that you reinforced, since that was a good fictional example?
Yeah. Well, you see, Entebbe's a funny one, because that was kind of... of course it happened, but at a different time. And to insert Garrigan into that story and, to make it happen alongside was... I love that kind of thing. I love being able to do that.
It's letting history go on around your characters, which is great.
It's exactly. You had this kind of extraordinary backdrop, but of course you're torturing the true time frame.
And the character, of course.
And the character, the meat hooks.
Yeah, talk about that. That's crazy.
That's pretty crazy. And it was there in Peter's fantastic draft. I can remember talking about this. We added the conversation that he has with Iddy was something that I worked on. That came from me, and that's one of my. I guess one of my, it sounds awful to say favourite moments because it's so dark, but as a conversation, the conversation that they have in that license where all the booze is an incredible conversation, because it's actually father-son, and it's between lovers, and it's also after the craziness that you've been through. One of the bizarrest conversations I've ever had to write, and then I said to Kevin, I think when the meat hooks go in, he shouldn't scream. And he said, why? And I said, because I like the idea that he does something heroic, and that Amin senses it. And actually, with the way he shot it, you can actually see Amin looking and waiting for him to scream, and he doesn't.
Right, and the screams, as Amin explains, were supposed to signify the evil being let out of him, as he said.
Precisely, because of what I mean. And that's an invented, that was entirely, that came out of some dark place in me. But
good to know.
But because it's set up, it's a classic setup. Because he says that, you know that he's waiting for the scream, and he doesn't scream. In fact, when they shot that, James fainted, because he got so into it. But little moments like that are what you live for, actually, when you're screenwriting. You know, those kind of when you can find something and you see it on screen like that.
That was a great moment. That's interesting the way you took the reality of Entebbe and had him escape there, whereas that's not something that actually happened. No, but that was great.
Yeah.
Few last questions. Sure. Strangest thing in the movie, they're watching the porn Deep Throat.
Yeah.
Where...
I'm not going to lay claim to that. That was Peter. That was Peter.
Oh, okay.
And it's brilliant, I think. It's brilliant.
Deep Throat is a brilliant film. I agree. It's a brilliant film.
Yeah, you got me there.
Oh, moment. Sorry,
You got me there. You got me there.
Were you involved when Forrest was cast? Were there any changes that you had to do as a rewriter for his character of Amin?
No, and I wasn't involved. I mean, Kevin had already been in discussions with him, and I mean, he was talking to me about that, of course. But no, that was separate from the work I was doing. I was like the partner who sits at home and watches him go off, and he was constantly traveling around, and we were in email contact the whole time while I was working. But no, Kevin had full control over the casting, and I didn't write for a voice, as I do sometimes. I would if I'm writing for myself, I'll write with a particular actor in mind.
It seemed like when there were tweaks needed, Kevin said he did them. We had him in the screening series a week ago because you were off directing your film, Driving Lessons. Peter was off on The Queen with Stephen Frears.
Yeah.
So, did you ever get any frantic emails from set? Or
we had some frantic conversations with Kevin actually in Uganda, but he's so self-deprecating. I mean, the truth is that he is an extraordinary talent.
Absolutely.
I mean, an extraordinary talent. Being Anglo-Saxon, I don't say that very often, but he really is. And the amazing thing from a screenwriting point of view is that you're working with someone who has such an integrity, such an antenna for the truth, that when they say they're tinkering, what they're actually doing is just making what you've done even better, and you don't argue with it. You just say, great, go for it.
So once again, just to clarify before we open it to the crowd, how long were you working on this project? You said 6 months?
About 6 months, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you did like a full rewrite in that time, basically?
Felt like that.
Okay. No, great.
I've never broken it down. And I don't care to. I mean,
that makes sense, I understand.
Yeah, there is a kind of a dignity which should be allowed. Yeah.
Between you and Peter, I understand.
I agree.
Absolutely.
I do think so, yeah.
I guess last question. You've now directed your feature Driving Lessons.
I have.
What was it that you were able to take as a writer from this project that helped you as a writer-director on Driving Lessons, which was your next project?
Make your openings shorter.
I mean, that's a great piece of advice.
It was so. Driving Lessons could not be more different, and it was a relief after the darkness that I experienced doing this. It's a very small character study of friendship and faith based on my own dysfunctional past, and it was just keep those openings tight, because when you come into the editing, you go, why did I write that? I don't need it, and I must have cut 4 or 5 minutes out of the first 15.
That's great. Let's open it up to the crowd for some questions. Right here in the front row. Just the combination of the two characters from the book that became Sarah in the film. Sorry.
Sarah Merritt is an interesting character because when we came to wondering how to balance the relationship with Sarah out against the relationship with Kay, I was concerned that the Sarah character was just going to get lost, and we did have scenes in the movie where she comes up, turns up, and they have a whole kind of scene together, and I wrote kind of 2 scenes for her, and they were in the movie till quite late on, and then Kevin said, I just don't feel comfortable with this, because when you sit it alongside the relationship with Kay, it diminishes the relationship with Kay, and at that point in the movie, Garrigan is actually falling in love, he's not falling in lust, and we ended up cutting the Sarah Merritt stuff right back. There's that moment where he sees her on the bus, and that really is the coalescing or the reduction of those 2 scenes into one moment. And it was a brave decision of Kevin's, because he was under pressure to do the more traditional thing, which was to kind of see her story through. and I thought he made the right decision.
You, ma'am, then we'll get you. Great question. Who were your inspirations before you wrote your first screenplay, and what were some of those great stories that inspired you?
Okay, I have a few heroes. I.L. Diamond and Billy Wilder. I'm a huge fan of The Apartment. I think it's one of the most beautifully written screenplays, and slightly darker than Some Like It Hot, which I also love. But I find I just can go back to The Apartment again and again. I think it's beautifully structured. In a different vein, Lasse Hallström's My Life as a Dog. I don't know if anyone knows that movie.
It's a great film.
It's a great film. I can remember seeing it. I can remember going into the movie theater and seeing this film and feeling like he knew me. And I just was blown away by it. It's still, for me, the best thing Lasse Hallström's ever done. I guess... what else? The Graduate. These are the kind of... I mean, I guess there's a sort of pattern to these. They tend to be films about growing up.
There's also a counterculture aspect to each of those movies.
Yeah. For the same reason I like Todd Solondz's The Dollhouse, and Alexander Payne's work I think is fantastic. I love bittersweet stuff. Yeah.
Great.
Alexander Payne is for my money one of the greats out there at the moment.
You, sir, in the blue. Talk about the process about getting into the mind of a man like Idi Amin.
Well, I have to say first off that a lot of the work had been done by Peter, so it was there in the script. I think that the key was doing the classic thing that as a screenwriter you have to do, which is never for one moment thinking that there are cardboard cutouts in the world. There are no cardboard cutouts. Even Hitler was a three-dimensional person, and even Hitler loved himself. So based on that assumption, you kind of work your way into the character, and your job is to find those moments, like when they're sitting down together and talking, to find common ground that they have. His Scottishness is key, because it means that they can both knock the English. And as an Englishman, I found that quite fun. But yeah, finding common ground and never for a moment running away from the character, being prepared to love him too, even though you know the facts, which is uncomfortable when you're writing it. It's uncomfortable.
Another question. All the way in the back. The question was, what actually happened to the quote composite of Dr. Kerrigan? It's
an interesting question, because I wrote a whole sequence that went after the scene in the aeroplane. And in the end, we junked that because Kevin felt, again, right choice, brave choice, that actually the movie ends when Garrigan's face kind of tilts against the glass pane, and you know that he has to face up to what part he's played in this. There is nothing more to say after that. I imagine that Garrigan goes on to be a doctor, and hopefully to do it with modesty and humility and shut up and kind of stop being the big I am. And hopefully he goes on to talk to people about the truth.
Is that what you wrote?
Yeah. And Kevin was right that it was, in a strange way, post hoc. It was no longer necessary, because all you had to do as an audience was to know that he had come through that experience. The most important line is in John Joe's line when he says, "You're a white man, they'll listen to you." It's one of the key lines in the movie.
That's interesting. Let's go for a few more questions. All the way on this side. Humor is tough to put into a movie about a genocidal dictator.
Maniac.
How did you infuse it here? Because you did do a good job.
Tone and the use of humor. It's a good question, and it was tricky, and we were always looking for the humor to be a commentary on, ironical rather than laugh out loud. The kind of humor that works best in the movie, I think, is almost tangential to the narrative. Like seeing Idi Amin dressed as a Scotsman is so weird and funny, and yet you're kind of going, my God, this guy is really, really weird. But it's also got a lightness and a humour to it. I was particularly fond of something that Kevin and I worked on was the song, and having the song be a kind of insane mixture of African and Scottish. So we were trying tonally to make the humour feel like it was an ironic comment on the circumstances that he found himself in. And later on in the movie, the humour has to fade, has to back off. There's a point in the film where it's no longer kind of morally and emotionally right. So there is a cut-off point, and you have to know where that is. And again, it took time.
It was also funny when all the female singers were singing like pop songs, like a different way. That was really interesting.
Yeah, the scene in the hotel when he goes, yeah. In fact, I think he was singing she was singing a Bowie song, but in the end, Kevin couldn't get that, so he did the Western, which is just as funny. Same idea.
It was a great moment of levity. A few more questions right here. You, sir, on the aisle. Question was, what was the budget on the film?
You're asking the screenwriter.
They told us last week.
I think it was like £4.5 million. I think something like that. Am I right?
It would be about $8 million.
Someone probably here knows better than I do. I think it was 4.5, like $8 million. And obviously,
which is incredible.
Yeah, and when you see it, you go, how did he do that? It's unbelievable, and it was shot on the Super 16, and that was also a very clever decision of Kevin's.
Second question is, who represents you as a screenwriter?
I'm represented at CAA by Michael Peretzian, who's a wonderful agent and has he's an Anglophile. He has a lot of English clients. Yeah.
Another question, right here, you, sir, in the white.
I'm ashamed to say that because I was shooting my own movie in London, I wasn't able to go there. Kevin used to email me and say everyone's got diarrhea. And I just kind of secretly thought, thank God I'm not going through this with him. I was desperately sad not to go out, though. Really, I was, because as a screenwriter, you will all know that you have 6 years of nothing, and then two things happening simultaneously. It's almost too tortuous. You just wish that they could have spread them out. For the same reason, I can't be in London when it opens the London Film Festival, because I'm here doing a junket for my own film. So, anyway, I should be so lucky, I guess.
Good problems to have.
Yeah.
A few last questions. Yeah. Right here, you, sir, in the middle. And we covered it slightly earlier, the difference between fact and fiction. The
Giles Foden novel had already set the template for whatever screenplays we were going to make, because he was the one who created this kind of coexistence between fact and fiction. I have no problem with that, because I believe that the story he created, using composites, remain true to the Ugandan experience of Amin, and I think that's the key. Kevin worked very, very hard not to do anything or suggest anything that wasn't, in his experience, something that he could verify. And he, even with the syphilis, we don't really refer to that, because there is some debate as to whether that was the case. So he was using his documentary skills to try and keep the right side of that difficult balance. But it was The Last King of Scotland by Giles Foden, and I think from that point on we were always in that mix.
Absolutely. Last question, right there, you, sir, in the white hat. Question was,
it's a good question.
Actors,
yeah.
Was there something you didn't see coming, something that they brought to the project?
Definitely, and I'll home in on it. James McAvoy's performance is just sensational. Forrest Whitaker's performance is brilliant and deserves all the plaudits it's getting. It's brilliant. James's performance is a quieter performance, but it is equally good. He brought all sorts of things that were not there in the final draft. He brought a kind of quality which is really hard to pin down in a screenplay, which is a kind of that perfect mixture between arrogance and innocence. He came into it. The scene on the bus when he's effectively a kind of sex tourist. It's like it's like he does it with a verve and elan that you just can't quite believe. It's so perfect and brave, and he's so unafraid to be a real. I mean, he's so bad sometimes. I can remember when I wrote the scene where he's seducing Sarah Merritt. I spent a long time working on that scene, and when I saw it, the way that James had performed it, and he did what actors do, which is to kind of play around with some of the lines that he did in rehearsal with Kevin, and he just added a level of mischievousness to it that just kept it the right side of ugly, I guess. But I think James's performance was, for me personally, it's the high point of the thing. I think it's an amazing performance, very brave.
We were lucky enough last week when we did our Q&A to not only have Kevin but also James, and I couldn't agree more. His performance
I think
was
it's stunning. I really do, and it's brave because he has to play someone who's incredibly selfish and solipsistic and vainglorious, and yet somehow hold us. We stay with him, and that's tough.
I think you and Peter did an excellent job on your screenplay. Let's give it up again for Jeremy Brock.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
And that's how the Q&A went down with co-writer Jeremy Brock for this, our second screening of The Last King of Scotland. Unfortunately, Peter Morgan was not available for this podcast. He also co-wrote the screenplay. But again, we were very grateful to have Jeremy come down and spend time with us. And hey, check out our September-October issue of Creative Screenwriting Magazine on stands now. It has the fountain on the cover. We have a Last King of Scotland article in there with both Jeremy and Peter interviewed. Speaking of drinks at the podcast, the podcast drinks possibility at our expo, look for signs. We might post a sign. It might be on one of the dry erase boards that has a time for people to meet up for the podcast. If you still haven't bought your expo tickets, you could go to www.screenwritingexpo.com and you could find out all about it there. If you're going to buy a ticket this late in the game, please save yourself some money. Use the discount code CSPodcast. That'll save you 10%. You could type it in when you're checking out. Don't forget those questions from Michael Arndt for our Little Miss Sunshine screening. The screening is October 24th. I need your questions in by October 23rd, and they need to say Little Miss Sunshine question in the subject of your email. Of course, send that email to me at rsvp@creativescreenwriting.com. I'm Jeff Goldsmith, thanking you for tuning into our podcast, and I'll have another one for you very, very soon.